Hi, and welcome to the second testimony that I'm going to be sharing. This testimony is going to be part of my testimony. I'll probably do it in two parts. So this first part, I'm going to share some of the things that God said to me or how he drew me to himself. And then right up to when the night that I actually prayed and gave my life to Christ. And then I'll share another video about that probably. Okay. So the first real memory that I've got of God or any mention of God was from my mother. And my mum, every night when she put us to bed, as she walked out the room, she'd always stop, and as she turned to close the door, she'd turn, look at us, and me and my brother in bed, little boys growing up, and she would say, "Night, God bless." That was a great comfort to me. We never had any other input from Christianity, God, religion, nothing like that. We weren't brought up, I wasn't brought up in a Christian family or went to church, nothing like that. So that always comforted me. And looking back, that was the first real thing that I can remember of God talking to me through my mum. The second thing was I have a memory of when I was about 5 years old, maybe 4, maybe 6, and it was a Sunday when this battered old minibus drew up outside of our house, just outside the front lawn, and took me to church, took me to a children's meeting. But that was the only time I went. But I've got a memory of just a few seconds of being in the meeting that I went to. Just an awareness of lots of people, and I remember that, and I'm sure God used that in his work, his ongoing work to draw me to himself. I remember it was a Baptist church, and many years later when I was at school near that same church, I remember the building. Then maybe 3, 4, 5 years later, I was about 9 years old, and I was sitting with my family. It was probably a Sunday afternoon, the Sunday afternoon movie film on TV. This would be the late 60s. And there was a film that came on TV, we were all watching it, and it was called The Robe. And it's quite a famous movie. It's got the character of Jesus in it, and it's about the robe that Jesus had on when he was crucified, and the story of that. Tony Curtis was in it, I think. But while I was watching that with my family, at one point when the character of Jesus came on to the film, I just got all emotional, and I covered my eyes over, and there was a deep, sweet feeling of this person, Jesus. Real. Something happening inside of me, and my eyes watered up, and I felt a deep emotion and longing and love, something all mixed in, that this person Jesus was wonderful, special. So that really stayed with me. So next thing that happened, probably again 3 or 4 years later after this, I was maybe 12 or so, there was a girl who used to walk along the top of the road where I lived, and she was really nice, and I fancied her. I was about 12, and she was walking to choir practice at the Roman Catholic Church, which was at the top of our road, big Roman Catholic building. And I can remember kind of following her into the church, going in the building, downstairs, feeling I'd never been in there before, a church before really. It was all kind of quiet, mystical. They were singing up, and I looked up the stairs, and I kind of glanced into the main kind of hallway, and connected with that. Around that time, I remember standing outside of that church one weekend, probably waiting for the bus, because there was a bus stop just outside of it, terminus, so you had to wait. And the door was open. It was a big church doors. They were open on a Sunday morning, and the singing was coming out, and it was beautiful. And I can remember listening to the singing, just listening to it and thinking how wonderful it was. That was something else that God used to speak to me, draw me to himself. The next thing that happened was probably about 5 years later. I was maybe 16, and it was a beautiful summer's evening. I was with my friends, 4 or 5 of us. We'd been out, we were 16, been out to the pub. My best friend at that time, he had a van. We all piled in the van. We'd been out to a pub. It was summer's evening, perfectly clear sky. We'd been out drinking, smoking dope and all the rest of it. And we drove out into the countryside to find a haystack. And we saw this big classic haystack right in the middle of a field, a big square-sided haystack, very tall. And we climbed up it and we lay on the top just as the stars were coming out. Beautiful summer's evening. The morning star was out and we just lay there for, I don't know, half an hour, 45 minutes. And as I lay there and as the stars came out, I was overwhelmed by the beauty, the magnificence, this panoply of stars. I was just absolutely overwhelmed, and I can remember saying out loud, there must be something more to life. I was overwhelmed by God's amazingness, beauty, splendour, the stars, the bigness, everything about it. That was a real, definitely kind of God speaking to me. I sensed that something had happened, kind of thing. Next thing that kind of happened was around that time as well. I was walking with my friend one busy Saturday in Birmingham in the Bullring shopping centre. This is the indoor shopping centre. This is like about 1977, 78. And I was walking with my friend, just the two of us. And as we were walking along, and remember it's busy, it's packed. As we were walking along this big kind of indoor shopping centre, a fight broke out just in front of us, just about 2 metres in front of us, a real proper fight. A young black guy and an older white guy. And no sooner had it kind of started than this power, I can only describe it as what I now know is the power of the Holy Spirit, but then I had no idea. It was like this power came upon me, the power of love, and I just went in and just stopped the fight. And I got them to try and reconcile. It maybe lasted about, I don't know, 15, 20 seconds or something. And then, I don't say it's he, because I know now it was the Holy Spirit. He just went and I was just there, kind of by myself. And for me to do that was completely out of character. And I remember kind of turning to my friend and, you know, looking at him, and he was staring at me as though I was crazy or something, you know. But looking back, that was God, you know, coming upon me and doing something in my life to give me a wake-up call, if you like. And a similar kind of thing happened around that time as well, probably a little bit later. And this happened because my grandma Smiley, my mum's mum, had passed on. We lived in Birmingham, but this grandma who died, my mum's mum, lived near Barnsley in Yorkshire, not far from where we are now, Leeds. So as a family, we travelled from Birmingham up to this little village called Cudworth, or Cudworth as they say, which is near Barnsley. And we had the funeral in the afternoon. Then afterwards there was a little kind of some food and alcohol. And then we stayed overnight because it was quite a long way to travel. And then we were travelling back the next day. But on the evening, when we'd all gone to bed, so this is after the funeral, after the food, the drinks and everything, we were in bed. It was probably 11, 12 at night. And as I was just going off to sleep, I might have gone to sleep, there was a commotion outside and it woke me up, and it was kind of a bit of noise, not shouting but talking. So I went outside into the hallway and into the bedroom where my mum was. And as I went in, I saw my mum crying, not crying, weeping, really, really sobbing her eyes out. She was really upset. And I went over, and this kind of power of love came on me, and I went and was able supernaturally to really empathise with her and find out what the problem was. And the problem turned out to be that my dad, her husband, had died 6 months or so earlier, and the memories from that, plus her mum dying and the alcohol that she'd been drinking, had brought to the surface all of this deep emotion and that. But I was just able, incredibly, to draw out of her and find out what the problem was. So that was another thing, and all these things were beginning to really get me thinking, because prior to that, and another thing that had happened that was around that time, maybe a little bit earlier really, from the age of about 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, through a family circumstance, I had contact with some quite well-off people, rich people, and through contact there, I realised that what I was really looking for in my life, meaning and purpose, many young men are, young people are, women as well. I saw through my contact with these wealthy people that even though they had money, they had no real meaning or purpose in their life. So that really spoke to me, and I thought, well, money isn't the answer. Money's not the answer to finding meaning and purpose in life. So that was something else that really spoke to me. And that got me, I suppose, when I was 15, 16, with starting with other friends to take soft drugs, dope, weed, all the usual stuff. Really as part of my kind of seeking or thinking, looking, hoping, is there any meaning to life? So there was this kind of pulling me forward, this desire to want meaning or purpose in my life, and also something that was pushing me forward as well was something that perhaps other people have in their lives, but one of the things that really affected me when I was growing up was that my father, I could see, was not really happy on the inside. So one of the things that I really had determined subconsciously really, but then kind of later on I kind of realised what it was. I didn't want to be like my dad. He had lots of real hang-ups and that. He was from a much older generation. He was in the war, etc. So there was this thing pulling me forward, wanting to have a purpose, meaning in my life, but also there was this other thing as well in my family that I don't want to be like my dad, and it was driving me forward almost, seeking, looking, trying to find something that could, help me, set me free, if you like. And around this time, thinking now, probably 1978, early 1979, I'm probably about 19 years of age. And these things had been happening, and I knew that I was somehow connected with God. These very clear experiences on the haystack. This power coming on me on 2 specific occasions, which I knew was nothing to do with me, but somehow probably was to do with God. This prompted me and drove me really to buy a Bible. I'd never had any contact with the Bible before. And I can remember going into a well-known bookshop in Birmingham city centre and feeling a bit self-conscious, but asking the shop assistant, can I have that Bible please? And I bought an RSV Bible, and I began to read it. I began to read John's Gospel, and as I began reading John's Gospel, God began speaking to me. One verse that he really spoke to me through was chapter 6 verse 37, and it says this: whoever comes to me I will never cast out. A modern version says, I will never drive away. And that really spoke to me. Another verse that really spoke to me at that time was John 6:35, where Jesus said, I am the bread of life. And that's exactly what I was looking for. I was wanting deep satisfaction in my life. And here's this person, Jesus, recorded, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry, never be thirsty. That really spoke to me. So these things were happening, but the final thing that happened was my actual conversion experience, if you like, the kind of final thing. And that happened in the winter of 1979, 1980, around about that time. And I'll share that in another video, and also the aftermath the following year or two after that. So for now, God bless you, and God bless.